More Muppets? You want more Muppets? She.
Back in the early 70s, before the Muppet Show was even picked up, Jim Henson had ideas about, and apparently a script for, a Halloween special. This story would feature Dr. Bredlo Friedley, a Muppet scientist looking kinda like Bernie, who invents a machine that lets him easily package and ship smog. Nice. That didn't work out so hot for Friedley, as Henson ended up going with a Valentine's Day special as a pilot instead. Years and years later, after Henson's death, his son Brian, according to an interview with TV Guide, wanted to do a series of holiday-themed TV specials to get the Muppets rockin' and rollin' again. The first of which being centered around the spooky season. But that idea was eventually canned for that lame-ass Muppet Show reboot Muppets Tonight, with any and all Halloween energy going into the cult classic video game and the soundtrack for this video, Muppets Monster Adventure. In fact, the plot of Muppets Monster Adventure, Robin having to run around to transform his friends and family back from evil movie monster versions of themselves, is more or less what they had planned for the special, with a few notable differences.
Clifford became the creature of the African-American lagoon.
I told you, racist-ass Muppet fans, Clifford was black. Don't fuck with me. That idea was turned into a movie, then back into a TV special, and then, like I said, finally became the plot of that game for the PSX. Funny enough, that original TV special was written by Kirk Thatcher, the eventual writer and director of The Muppets Haunted Mansion. In 2001, the company announced via a press release flyer that there were 2 features in the works, one of which was titled Muppet Haunted Movie. This script, written by Dan Milano 3 years prior and soon retitled to The Muppets Haunted Hotel, was apparently being worked on at the same time as something called Muppet Haunted House, written by Thatcher and his partner Jim Lewis. Writing partner. That project was the only one of the 2 that was noted in some documents from when the silly little future owners of Google, Walt Disney Enterprises, got their hands on the IP. Joey Mazzarino, the writer of Muppets from Space, was involved somewhere along the line too, but it's hard to place his involvement on the timeline other than that it was before Muppets from Space.
Doctor?
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 Oh, doctor.
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 Just a couple of doctors.
Doctor's in the hallway.
There was another film written, A Haunting We Will Go. I think that's the title. I may be mixing these damn things up. There's like 12 of them. Come on. This one was again penned by Thatcher and his writing partner Jim Lewis, and involved the Muppets turning into ghosts instead of monsters via actually dying? Maybe? I don't know. There's conflicting stories on the how of it all. But as ghastly ghoulish ghosts, they have to learn how to haunt, while Colonel Sanders' stand-in is horny for Miss Piggy, who's the last non-ghost Muppet left. This sucker went through a couple rewrites before it was eventually pushed aside for a planned slasher parody from the Muppets. That script was written by Patrick Johnson and the previously mentioned Mazzarino, according to Thatcher, who poo-pooed the idea, but I don't know, sounds kinda cool to me. Muppet Murder didn't go over too well though, so another version of the idea was written. This time, Lewis and Thatcher took another crack, with the plot being monster versions of the Muppets trying to put on a Halloween-themed live show in New York, which included a climax where Kermit turns into King Kermit, or whatever they were going to call him, a King Kong parody that climbs the Empire State Building, with Miss Piggy having to coax him down. That script, tentatively titled The Monsters Muppet Halloween Special, again, went through a couple rewrites before being dropped entirely to put all hands on deck for the big upcoming reboot movie. That's right, that's how long this was taking. We're all the way there now. During a presentation by longtime Muppet Show writer Craig Shemin, plus some other big Muppet names including Heather Henson and Dave Goelz, the man behind Gonzo the Great, there were evidently some pretty serious talks about a Halloween special the team had planned, according to an article from WDW Radio, that release being paired with the long-awaited release of official Muppet Halloween costumes.
Very scary.
A 2010 date was even announced for the debut at D23 later that year, but again, it got postponed, quote-unquote, for the Funny Walter movie. And not a Halloween show specifically, but I should also mention Uncle Deadly's House of Badness, a scary story anthology series kinda like or Goosebumps, which was apparently mentioned as an upcoming Thatcher Muppet project in Written By magazine in December of 2000, but we never heard anything else about it, ever. I also didn't see it mentioned by Thatcher himself in any interviews or nothing like that, and I can't find the original article, so maybe this is fandom wiki bullshit? Who knows? If you have a copy of Written By magazine from December of 2000, please clip that article out and send it to my P.O. box. Or my P.O. officer. It wouldn't be until May 2021 that we would hear anything else about Spooky Ooky Muppets when Gonzo and the man, the myth, the legend himself, Pepe the King Prawn, announced via the Muppets YouTube page a quote, all new tale of terrifying scariness. The subject of this dang video finally, Muppets Haunted Mansion. According to Deadline, this project was revealed during Disney's annual Halfway to Halloween event, where they hype up what's going to happen come fall. At D23 in 2021, Kermit announced the quote, first ever Muppet Halloween program. And according to Gonzo on Good Morning America, it's because they ran out of holidays, citing Christmas directly and bringing us to the whole point of this video essay. And that's how much this special harkens back to that post-Jim Henson 90s era of the Muppets that my generation and the one directly below it are so nostalgic for. But we'll touch on that more as we go. At first, before I did all that dang research, I found it really hard to believe that a Muppets Halloween special or movie or nothing like that never actually got made before this bad boy. But apparently Kermit isn't lying. This time. There was the aforementioned Muppets Monster Advention for... Advention? What the fuck is an advention? There was the aforementioned Muppets Monster Adventure for the PlayStation 1, some Sesame Street Halloween episodes, a little online exclusive content, and of course stuff like the Vincent Price episode of The Muppet Show. And I'm sure I'm forgetting something somewhere, but yeah, Muppets Haunted Mansion was the team's first real crack at something spooky scary on this kind of scale. As far as where the idea for the special came from, Pepe himself, Bill Beretta, cited live shows like the Muppets Take the Bowl, where there was a routine called Gonzo's Magical Delusions, as to what gave birth to the idea of Gonzo and his own story surrounded by supernatural elements. According to Beretta, the idea was the result of wanting to do a new Muppet special and for that special to be centered around one of the theme park rides. So he teamed with Thatcher, Lewis, and Kelly Younger to brainstorm up the Muppets X Haunted Mansion combo around early 2020, which was originally written as a feature-length film.
We really wanted to make sure that it was a Muppet-centered story.
Once the idea was thunked up, the whole thing was put on hold because of the salmonella pandemic that year until around, funny enough, just after Halloween time, which is when they cooked up the first draft and were told they had to make this sucker less than an hour long, with the green light finally coming in January 2021, leaving the team with only 2 months to do rewrites and casting. Not a lot of time at all. Pandemics aside, when you ask the big why now question after all those failed attempts, goals, Gonzo, if you done did forgot already, says it was always impossible to figure out what age group to pitch the special at, which is why it took literal decades to be made. I guess it took until the Muppets in general had that problem for them to just be like, fuck it. Goals said they didn't want to scare the kiddos, but they still wanted the parents engaged. He went on to state that kids today are much braver than grown-ups, whatever the fuck that means, citing his recent Five Nights at Freddy's playthrough that I just made up. Beretta, on the other hand, says it was the fact that they could use the Haunted Mansion and silly songs as the actual reason they were able to bridge that gap, but seemingly being stoked at the thought that the special might give kids the heebie-jeebies. And man, I gotta add, the music is one of the best aspects of this special to me. Particularly what's turned into my favorite Electric Mayhem song and my favorite version of Dancing in the Moonlight. Which might be sacrilege to say, but sorry to the 6 people still listening to the oldies. And even more sorry that it's the oldies now, and not just classic rock. Classic rock stations are too busy playing shit like Sublime and Nirvana. God damn, I'm older than shit. And hearing that Rest in Peace, the banger number that kicks off the program, uses some of the lyrics from the Grim Grinning Ghosts, a song from the actual Haunted Mansion ride. Pretty cool.
Grim Grinning Ghosts come out to socialize.
But another person who was a key player in this whole shindig, and was actually the person the team had to pitch the special to, was Lee Slaughter, the vice president of Muppet Studio and live character strategy for Walt Disney Imagineering, which I did not know the Muppets fell directly under the Imagineering umbrella until right now. That's interesting. That was also pretty convenient for the special because the team could keep true to the mythology of the Haunted Mansion, which, unlike other projects based around park rides, was able to stick pretty close to the surprisingly elaborate lore of the Haunted Mansion ride. The program even used direct quotes and, like I said, lyrics from the ride itself.
No flash pictures, please. The spirits are frightfully sensitive to bright lights.
Staying true to the backstory of the ride is something, according to the Imagineers, that was rarely the case in the over 200 Haunted Mansion scripts that had been pitched since the ride's inception, with it being Disney themselves making changes like deciding the guns featured in the actual real-life ride were too much for a generation of kids who were playing Fortnite at 3. People who always call me a liberal, take note of that one, write it down, etch it in your brain, tattoo it under your SS. Some of those restrictions, as they usually tend to do, led to improvements though, like the company shying away from the use of tiki-based imagery and dialogue, leading to the cute little almost cameo by Angel Marie, this nasty looking fella from Muppet's Treasure Island. When it was cut down from a 90-minute script, there were other changes, like a lab featuring Bunsen and Beaker getting cut, making what they say in their little cameo an actual fourth wall break.
I had so hoped we'd have a bigger cameo, Beaky. Budget.
Now, I don't know anything about Disney's Haunted Mansion, never watched the Eddie Murphy movie or the one from a couple years back, and despite the content on this channel, I am far from a Disney adult. Those SOBs didn't even acquire my favorite IP of theirs until pretty recently, Family Guy. Plus, the rides make me sick. I was thinking about watching the Haunted Mansion movies for this, but I'm talking about how the special relates to Muppet content, more so than its relationship with the Haunted Mansion theme park ride. And that being said, one thing that's so cool about this special is that you don't need to know much about Disney's Haunted Mansion to enjoy it. Those who know. They'll get the references and giggle, but it's not necessary knowledge going in. Beretta, when asked about working within the Haunted Mansion parameters, said he liked the dark, rich look of the special, as opposed to the bright and shiny palette of most recent Muppet productions. And of course he's talking about the aesthetic of the special, but I think this could also apply to the overall themes and story, which when working in unison, creates such an immersive experience for something that's essentially a TV special. Thatcher himself even came up with some of the Muppet monster designs, working with a company called Puppet Heap, and having to fight with Disney over some of the more spooky, scary redesigns of characters like Fozzie, with his teeth in particular being a pain point. He also worked closely with production designer Darcy Prevost, who he had previously collaborated with and who herself had a thorough understanding of Disney's Haunted Mansion. Thatcher also mentioned Jasper Anderson, a special effects artist with a whole slew of Marvel movies under his belt. Thatcher, on twitter.x.com, stated that this special was filmed in April of 2021 and took 18 days. Telling legendary Muppet fan site Tough Pigs, who I should have cited way before this, I'm sorry H-Bomber guy, that they worked long days because of all the ins and outs of working with puppets and sets this extravagant, but morale, especially with the big name actors involved, was very high the whole time filming. Fun little factoid, during production, this was called Project Vincent, assumingly after iconic spooky scary Muppet collaborator and guy I mentioned earlier, Vincent Price. Once filmed, the announcements of the cast and crew would be slowly rolled out, leading up to an October 8th exclusive release on Disney+, making its TV debut on Disney Channel just over a year later on October 22nd, 2022. Because of the timing of the release, Muppets Haunted Mansion's premiere was at a drive-in. Pretty common thing for events at the time, with this one taking place the night before the Disney Plus debut at West Los Angeles College. In that Tough Pigs interview, Thatcher brings up the fact that he loves working with Slaughter because she can really lean into the edgier side of the Muppets. But contrary to that, there was a lot of talk of the kiddos on the red carpet for that premiere. Particularly funny Helen from Drake and Josh, who talked about learning a lesson and all that jazz, which, no, isn't inherently a kids' media thing, but she mentions those lessons being for kids specifically. So seemingly, and obviously if you're paying attention, a bit of a disconnect between the old guard of the Muppets who are still around and the current public perception of the IP, which I think can often cause issues for modern Muppet content, but Haunted Mansion is not an example of that. Speaking of classic Muppets, in that same interview, Thatcher said that he also wanted to use Thalg, the big blue fella from the Muppet Show, as one of the monsters in the special, but the suit is apparently, as he put it, dust. The same was the case for Johnny Fiamma and Sal, but as weird as I find Johnny Fiamma, new least favorite Muppet by the way, it was nice to hear Beretta, Thatcher, and the team were able to get those puppets restored for the special. Shame they couldn't do the same for my boy Thalg, though.
Yeah, man, I miss my Uncle Charles, y'all.
Thatcher also mentioned Scooter's uncle J.P. Gross and some of the Treasure Island Muppets as names he wanted to return for this project, but again, they were, as is the official Muppet term apparently, toast. As far as Muppet characters that did make the program, we gotta start with Gonzo the Great. Now, I don't want to do a beat-for-beat recap of the plot, because 1, boring, and 2, if you want to know what happens, go watch it. But I gotta bring up the climax and what might be the most powerful Gonzo scene since he sang that song to the sky in the Muppet movie. So if you haven't actually seen the special, turn this off, open up Disney Plus, crinkle your toes at your webcam for the government to see, and watch the Muppets Haunted Mansion yourself. I mean, the whole point of the video is that the special's good. Directly based off 2001 A Space Odyssey, an influence probably shared by the Vision Quest episode of Blue Mountain State for those who watched my last video, we gotta talk about the scene where Gonzo sees himself as a crusty old man in the mirror, talking about what really scares him. Friendship. I love the design of old Gonzo. It's been stated a ton, but still can't be stated enough how much they knocked this freaky looking thing out of the park. But what really gets me, emotionally, is the way he shakes. What a brilliant, and when you think about it, incredibly deep choice by Goals. The Gonzo aging deal was even more fleshed out in the feature-length version of the script, with his nose eventually falling off completely. But that was just too scary for Disney. But what remained of that plot? Some peak Gonzo to me. While his performance in the ABC Muppet sitcom was entertaining, it really doesn't belong in the same conversation with stuff like this and Christmas Carol. Stories that really utilize how dynamic and emotionally engaging the character of Gonzo can be. But unfortunately, due to all the Steve Whitmire Disney drama that I don't feel like explaining, but I assume you already know because you're on Muppet Tube, we're missing out on Gonzo's classic partner in crime, Rizzo the Rat. Now to me, this, and even more so for a reason I'll explain in a second here, really calls back to that aforementioned 90s era of the Muppets, where missing a cog in the Muppet machine, at that time being due to the deaths of Henson and Muppet legend Richard Hunt, made it so some classic Muppet characters couldn't even speak or show up at all, like Scooter in Muppets Tonight. So what are your choices at that point? You could create a whole new character to fill that role, i.e. Clifford, or you could next man up it and elevate the role of an existing Muppet that audiences are already familiar with. Post Jim Henson, we saw Whitmire's Rizzo go from just one of the rats in Muppets Take Manhattan to being Gonzo's right-hand man in some absolute classics. So without Rizzo, who stepped up for the Haunted Mansion? Well, that would be none other than the third musketeer of the trio and perhaps my favorite Muppet, Pepe the King Prawn. In that Tough Pigs interview, Thatcher even called Pepe the spiritual successor to Rizzo, with the chemistry of those three really being cemented in that ABC series I love bringing up.
Hey, don't mind me, fellas. I accidentally just slipped and need Camilla in the dark meat. I'm gonna get some ice.
Hey, Gonzo, will you come into the bar tonight?
Oh, sorry, guys, but Camilla wants to stay home and watch Logan's Run.
Oh, Logan's Run. Make mine at Denver.
You got it.
The essence of Pepe's character, paraphrased from Thatcher who helped create the Muppet, is that he wants to be a star and wants to be a playboy. That last part, not paraphrased, because I'd paraphrase it as Crawdaddy. But that selfishness really gave some room for the team to play with the character, sort of in a rabbit from Winnie the Pooh kind of way. Pepe can realistically create conflict through his character flaws, learn his lesson, even get his comeuppance, as Thatcher puts it. Something you don't really want to see happen to most of the Muppets cast. He also lovingly compares Pepe to Daffy Duck. Not really here nor there, I just love Daffy, so I had to mention it.
The goo from our roof is here!
While Pepe may have filled Rizzo's hole, Paul's, that funny little rat surely wasn't Whitmire's biggest responsibility. That, of course, would be Kermit the Frog. The fellow who took over Kermit, Matt Vogel, though immensely talented, doesn't exactly have the most consistent Kermit voice when compared with the rest of the Muppet canon. Though that's not really his fault, he didn't get the proper training time usually given to a Muppet performer, but again, not getting into it. All that to say, I found Kermit's role in Haunted Mansion to be particularly interesting and a really smart play by the writing team. Kermit isn't a main character, but doesn't feel noticeably absent like he does in something like Muppets Mayhem. He's still a key part of the story, despite not physically being in the center of the plot himself. He's important, but we don't have to hear too much of Vogel's Kermit at all, even putting him under a pig nose at one point early to kind of muffle his voice and make it nasally.
Don't forget to eat Halloween breakfast tomorrow morning.
I think we're having pumpkin pancakes.
The Muppet cameos in this are phenomenal as well, like Robin in his Tiny Tim outfit. Apparently, a lot of the costuming in general was pulled from the Christmas Carol movie, since it shares a similar Victorian-era feel as the Haunted Mansion. We got a throwback to those old ballroom dancing bits from the Muppet Show, and Joe the Legal Weasel even shows up. That's right, everybody's favorite, Joe the Legal Weasel, the icon himself. Truly the best thing to come from Muppets Now, that dog ass series.
We need to upload Muppets Now.
Now?
Now!
Get away from that! Okay?
From the Muppets to the actors, there was a lot of ad-libbing on set, particularly from and around a returning Brian Henson. My favorite guest on this bad boy, though, has to be the ghost host, played by Will Arnett, who, of course, voices the two greatest characters in all of fiction. Arnett was near the top of the list when it comes to actors they wanted from the jump, but other names were certainly in the running. Kevin Kline, star of the horniest cartoon in history, expressed interest in the part until he found out they were shooting in LA instead of taking Manhattan as the Muppets typically do. Some potential cast members also had holdups over COVID concerns, as the production was filming inside and needed around 60 people on set at a time. But despite all that, we got a stellar list of non-Muppet cameos, including one of Ed Asner's last roles, as well as Taraji P. Henson, no relation, who has stellar chemistry with Pepe, leading to another one of my favorite scenes in the whole special, the one where she hits that crazy popper effect on our boy. If you get that joke, you should be ashamed of yourself. You need to go to church. Now, I doubt we'll get any more Muppet projects that the team has been stewing up for more than 50 years, but I think they can learn a thing or two from the care and dedication put towards Haunted Mansion. The closest thing we got to a Muppet OG at the helm, support from the Disney team, and you could say that's because it was about a Disney park ride, but hey, if that's what it takes for these fuckers to care about the Muppets, I say make a friggin' Splash Mountain Muppet special for all I care. It would fit right in. But I think more so than any of that, and probably more accurately because of all that, this special's strongest trait is, like I said, how much it feels like those classic Muppet movies from the 90s. If you watch this and don't immediately think back to Christmas Carol and Treasure Island, I don't think we're watching the same special. And in a world where nostalgia means money, especially to Disney, that kind of feeling is exactly what a struggling property like the Muppets really needs.